injured or disfigured, but none of that was as unsettling as the dark liquid smeared across his face. It looked like blood. Charles saw it too, and the two of us exchanged a really terrified look. Eventually, the man ducked out of sight. The guard finally passed us, and we kept moving. We didn't say a word as we made our way back to the fence. I kept checking over my shoulder every few seconds, convinced we were being followed, but no one was there. We made it back to the fence, scaled it the same way we came in, and dropped down on the other side. The difference was, this time we didn't laugh about it. All I wanted was to be back in the safe confines of our tent. I could tell Charles was thinking the same thing. By the time we made it back to our tent, neither of us brought up sleeping. We just lay there in our sleeping bags, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. The best we could come up with was that it was some homeless guy doing God knows what. A stupid explanation, I know, but we couldn't think of anything else. The next morning started off normally. We got up, had a bite to eat, and started packing our gear to go fishing. But around 10 a.m., one of the camp staffers came around to our tent site and gave us an announcement that the whole campsite was supposed to hear. Apparently, a man had been stabbed and killed the night before at a lake about 4 miles away from the campground. They weren't giving many details, but the guy who did it was still on the loose, and the local sheriff's office had asked all park rangers and campsite staff within a certain mile radius to be on high alert. They described him as a disheveled white male in his late 30s, shirtless, possibly bleeding, or with blood on his clothes. Then they instructed us to pack our things and leave for our own safety. Charles and I instantly connected the dots. It must have been that guy we had seen the night before. We kept our mouths shut. We didn't tell my dad. We didn't tell the rangers, and I still don't really know why. I know I'm going to get a bunch of hate for this, and I get it, but at that age, I was more convinced with staying out of trouble than anything else. I still kick myself for not speaking up. My statement could have led to the capture of a dangerous person who may have gone on to commit more crime. I'm still close with Charles. We went to the same college, graduated together, and work in similar fields. This experience is something we don't often talk about, though. If I'm being honest, I think Charles feels much more guilty about not speaking up than I do. Mistakes and regret aside, though, I think it's crazy that my friend and I were mere feet away from a murderer on the run. I don't like thinking about what could have happened had we crossed paths that night. This happened back in October of 2016, right when that weird clown hysteria was all over the news. People were posting creepy clown sightings across the country. Most of them were obviously hoaxes or people just trying to get attention, but as you know, there were a couple true cases that were downright terrifying. What happened to me was one of them. I was 16, a junior in high school. I had just finished 7th period, and after saying goodbye to all my friends, I hopped on the 6 train heading uptown. The train was mostly empty, which was kind of unusual but not unheard of. I wasn't being very attentive to my surroundings. I had my headphones in, and I was blasting music. Drake, probably. To make matters worse, I was reviewing chem flashcards on my phone, so I was about as unaware as humanly possible. Never a good idea when traveling alone, but I knew the area well enough to know I'd probably be fine. I was planning to get off at 96th and walk home from there. Nothing unusual, just a regular Wednesday. But things went downhill really fast. We arrived at 96th, and I jumped out of my seat instinctively, barely even looking up to make sure it was the right station. That train ride was something I had done so many times that the routine had become second nature. Getting on and off was like a reflex. With my head still buried in my phone and my music still blasting in my ears, I made my way over to the doors. But as soon as they slid open, I realized out of the edge of my vision that something was obstructing my path. I looked up and realized some guy had stepped directly into the doorway, only it wasn't a normal person. It was a clown. He was wearing the full getup. Oversized rainbow pants, a baggy yellow shirt with red suspenders, giant red shoes, and this exaggerated white makeup smeared across his face. Red nose, blue eyebrows, the whole cartoon nightmare. The only thing missing was the wig. I was literally frozen in shock at the sight of him. Not only was I caught completely off guard, but until then, I had never been in such close proximity to something so bizarre. He didn't say anything, he just stood there, not trying to get on the train, but clearly preventing me from getting off. I snapped out of my haze and realized I had a good 5 seconds before the doors would close, so I had to do something. I tried to brush past him, but the literal moment I made contact with him, he leaned down in one fluid motion like he was trying to make sure we were face to face. Before he could grab or restrain me, I sprinted past him, and that's when he lurched forward in an attempt to tackle me. I dodged him and continued running, and he started chasing me. It was terrifying. There was no one else around, and I was being chased by a killer clown. The 96th Street station is relatively quiet in the early afternoon, so I was essentially on my own. I shot a glance behind me and saw him pursuing me, only his stride wasn't normal. He was running with this jerky motion like his limbs were disproportionate, but I was much more focused on what was now in his hand. It was what looked like a kitchen knife. I didn't know where he had been hiding it or what his intentions were, but I didn't care. I ran up the stairs and out of the station and immediately reported the situation to the police. He didn't follow me onto the street, but I was still pretty shaken up. The police sent someone down to the station, but he was gone by then. Even after talking to the police and being reassured that I was safe, I couldn't get the irrational thought out of my head that he somehow knew where I lived and was going to track me down later. But that obviously didn't happen. In fact, nothing else ever happened at all. I wouldn't be surprised if my story ended up on the news as one of the many strange clown encounters of 2016, although I can't say for sure. It took me a few weeks to fully get over this experience. This isn't your typical scary story, but I promise it's worth a listen. I was 2 years out of undergrad when the whole thing started. While I was technically getting an online graduate certificate at the same school I had obtained my bachelor's at, I still had a ton of free time on my hands. During that period of my life, I was jumping around from odd job to odd job, looking for any old gig to fill the hours and help me stack some cash. Let's just say Indeed was my best friend at the time. I honestly found 90% of my leads from that one website alone. I was getting tired of door dashing around the same 6 neighborhoods for minimum wage, so I decided a change of pace was in order. As I was browsing Indeed later that night, I stumbled upon something intriguing. It was a private lifeguarding job at a hotel a few towns over. I know that doesn't sound that abnormal by itself, but there were a couple of strange details in that listing that gave me pause. First of all, the hours were backward, like they weren't normal pool hours. You'd expect a typical hotel pool to open sometime in the morning and close sometime in the